1025 CE. In the heart of the Indian Ocean, a shadow rose over the horizon. Not clouds, not storm winds, but warships, hundreds of them. Their sails burned gold under the sunrise, and every kingdom of Southeast Asia knew one thing: the Cholas were coming, and no ocean was wide enough to stop them. This is the untold story of the empire that ruled the seas. Chola Naval Dominance, a Thugilan Arc Studio original. The story of the Cholas does not begin on the ocean. It begins with silence. A silence that hung over the fertile plains of the Kavari, where water glittered like spilled silver. And farmers moved through the fields with the same rhythm their ancestors had known for centuries. A silence broken only by temple bells, river current, and the hum of a civilization preparing itself for something far greater than survival. For generations, the Cholas existed like a memory mentioned, heard of, occasionally rising, mostly fading. The world barely noticed them. At the turn of the 10th century, they were a kingdom without thunder. But the land was changing. The monsoons had shifted their moods. Trade winds began to carve new paths across the Indian Ocean, and the Bay of Bengal the quiet. Eastern Sea was becoming something new, a highway of wealth. Spices, camphor, gold, porcelain, elephants, ivory. Every kingdom from Arabia to China wanted everything that passed through this ocean. Whoever controlled this sea did not just control wealth, they controlled destiny. And far away in the paddies of Thanjavur, a dynasty was awakening, watching, calculating, waiting for its tide. Before the Cholas looked outward, they strengthened everything within. The Kaveri Delta was no ordinary landscape. It was a natural fortress disguised as farmland, a land that gave its rulers more than loyalty. It gave them abundance. Villages were arranged not randomly, but with precision. Agriculture was tied to a network of canals carved with frightening accuracy for their time. In Chola territory, water never wandered. It obeyed, and this mastery over rivers would soon echo in their mastery over oceans. But prosperity alone does not build an empire. Ambition does. And ambition, in this story, had a name. In the year 985 CE, Arul Mozi Varman ascended the throne. History remembers him with a simpler name, Rajaraja Chola. To his people, his arrival felt like a shift in the air itself. He was not a dreamer. Dreamers hope. He was not a conqueror. Conquerors take. This was something rarer. A ruler who understood time. He knew the Cholas could no longer remain landbound. He saw what others ignored, that kingdoms rise by swords, but empires rise by shipping lanes. And before he touched the sea, he would prove he could command the land. The Pandyas, the Cheras, the Rashtrakutas, Sinhala kings. Every name was a barrier, every border a challenge, every rival a test. The greatest king Rajaraja entered this political storm with the calm of a man who had already seen the ending. Campaign after campaign, he reshaped southern India, not with blind aggression, but with geometry, measured, deliberate, precise. His enemies were not merely defeated. They were erased from strategic relevance. And with every victory, something else was forming. A treasury deep enough to build dreams, a population confident enough to support them, and a political foundation stable enough to stand on water. But even this was not yet enough, because across the sea, greater challenge waited. Sri Lanka, a jewel in the Indian Ocean, but a thorn in the Chola chest. For decades, its kings had played a dangerous game, harassing Chola merchants, manipulating Tamil politics, and, worst of all, threatening the trade arteries the Cholas relied upon. Rajaraja knew the truth. A land empire cannot survive with a hostile sea at its doorstep. So he did what few Indian rulers before him dared. He prepared for war across water. No one expected what came next, not even the Lankans. When the Chola fleet set sail, the coastlines of southern India watched something new unfold. The sight of a kingdom stepping beyond its geography. Ships moved in rows. Soldiers unfamiliar with the motion of waves learned to anchor their balance with discipline. Commanders studied the tides like they studied enemies. It wasn't simply a campaign. It was a rehearsal. The invasion of Sri Lanka was fierce, calculated, and devastatingly effective. The Cholas did not merely claim victory. They embedded themselves into the island's politics, securing ports, fortifications, logistical hubs. This was the first sign that the Cholas were no longer thinking like kings. They were thinking like a maritime power. But the story does not linger in Lanka, because King Rajarajan's eyes were already somewhere else, on the horizon, past the edge of familiarity, past comfort, past fear, towards Southeast Asia. During the Sri Lankan campaigns, a young prince traveled with the army. His name was Rajendra. He saw ships, not as vessels, but as possibilities. He stood on unfamiliar shores, absorbing everything. The behavior of waves, the movement of fleets, the way islands connected like stepping stones across the ocean. If Rajaraja built the foundation, Raja Chola would become the storm. But first, the sea had to be understood, measured, respected. While his father expanded the empire outward, Rajendra expanded it forward, studying new diplomatic channels, political alliances, and maritime cultures. The idea forming in his mind was enormous. It's impossible, most would say. Yet history favors those who attempt the impossible. Across the Bay of Bengal, another set of kingdoms rose from the rainforest and the river deltas. Srivijaya, a name whispered in the harbors of traders. Thalassocracy, a kingdom born of water, living off water, ruling by water. They did not fear armies. They feared fleets. Because fleets meant trade. Trade was power. Srivijaya controlled the Malacca Strait, one of the most valuable choke points in world history. Any ship sailing from India to China or from China to Arabia passed through their hands. The Cholas prospered because of trade. Jaya prospered by controlling trade. This was not rivalry. This was collision. Two empires, both claiming the ocean. Only one could command it. The boy who watched the sea was becoming the man who would rule it. The years following the Sri Lankan conquest were not quiet. Empires rarely rest after tasting movement. They evolve, they adjust, and they watch the world with sharper eyes. And in Thanjavur, the rhythm of the empire shifted. Monasteries echoed with new languages, Sinhala, Malay, Khmer, even fragments of Chinese. Merchants flocked to the Chola ports with unusual confidence. For it was now clear that the Cholas had mastered what many feared, military projection across water. But even this success carried a shadow. Because with every new harbor, every new port, every new trader seeking shelter in Chola lands, one name kept returning in murmurs: Srivijaya, a maritime giant, gatekeeper of the sea, a kingdom that taxed trade like it owned the ocean itself. And somewhere in the palace of Thanjavur, Rajendra Chola listened to these murmurs with a quiet fire growing in him. He had inherited not just his father's armies, but his father's unfinished ambitions. Rajendra was not a warrior created in battle. He was crafted by experience. He had marched with Rajarajan into Tamil conquests. He had stood in the rainforests of Sri Lanka. He had watched ships cut through angry gray waters as if testing the patience of the sea itself. But what made Rajendra different was his refusal to see water as separation. To him, the ocean was continuity, a blue thread connecting civilizations, not dividing them. And so, even while Rajarajan fortified the land empire, Rajendra was slowly, quietly, and methodically building the foundations of a naval empire. He expanded harbors. He improved lighthouse systems. He reorganized maritime guilds. He brought foreign sailors into Chola service. And most importantly, he began designing ships that no Indian kingdom had ever dared to build. In Nagapattinam and Kavaripatnam, the air smelled of freshly cut timber, tar, and salt. Shipyards roared like hives. Workers moved like they were part of one giant machine. Orders were shouted over the crash of waves and the clank of iron tools. A new kind of vessel was emerging, bigger, wider, with reinforced hulls, and sails dyed with deep red ochres that caught the wind like captured fire. These were not merchant ships. They were not fishing boats. They were not coastal vessels. They were built for the open ocean. They were built for storms. They were built to carry armies. They were built for distance. And when the first of these giants slid into the water, the people gathered on the shore felt the shift. India had built large ships before, but never an armada with this intention, to dominate, not just sail the ocean. The fleet did not yet have an enemy, but it had a direction. News travels faster across water than across land, and whispers of a growing Chola naval force began unsettling kingdoms across Southeast Asia. Srivijaya, in particular, paid attention. For centuries, it had controlled the Malacca Strait, not with walls, but with fear. Merchants paid their taxes, kings paid their respect, and ships that refused both simply vanished. But now, a distant empire, powerful, organized, and restless, was building something dangerous. Not a fleet, a challenge. Srivijaya's leaders had a choice: engage diplomatically or quietly prepare. They chose diplomacy. Emissaries were sent, gifts crossed the sea, courtesies exchanged hands. But behind every polite message, there was an unspoken truth. Two maritime worlds were on a collision course. In 1014 CE, the empire changed hands. Rajaraja Chola passed away, leaving behind a legacy of conquest, order, and the possibility of something greater than any Indian king had attempted. His son ascended the throne as Rajendra Chola I, and the transformation was instant. The new emperor carried the weight of ambition differently. He was not content with expansion. He wanted reach. The earth beneath his land empire was secure. The rivers obeyed him, the armies respected him, but the ocean still belonged to someone else. Rajendra had no intention of sharing it. The moment he took power, Rajendra moved like a man making up for lost time, secured the eastern Gunga region, sent armies into the rich plains of the north, completed the massive task of pushing Chola influence deeper into India than any southern ruler had achieved. But this was merely the warm-up, because every conquest on land was fueling something larger across the sea. Ports expanded. Shipyards grew louder. Maritime taxes flowed like rivers. And the naval officers, no longer a coastal defense force, became a prestigious elite. The Chola Navy was evolving into a professional machine. Organized fleets, trained marines, coordinated squadrons. Old Tamil poems spoke of war elephants shaking the earth. Foreign sailors whispered of Chola sea elephants, massive ships whose shadows fell over the water like floating fortresses. Rajendra had an empire. Now he needed a reason to move it across the sea, and Srivijaya was providing that reason day by day. Trade disputes between the two powers intensified. Chola merchants complained of harassment. Chola envoys reported delays, taxes, and disrespect. Pilgrims traveling to Buddhist centers under Srivijayan control faced obstruction. What began as minor irritations grew into strategic hostility. The Cholas thrived on open seas. Srivijaya thrived on controlling them. These two realities could not coexist. For Rajendra, the sea lanes to China were non-negotiable. For Srivijaya, controlling those lanes was survival. Tension thickened like storm clouds. When a diplomatic insult was delivered small in words, heavy in implication, Rajendra realized it was no longer diplomacy, it was a challenge. And in the halls of Thanjavur, before his commanders and ministers, Rajendra spoke the decision that would change the map of Asia. The ocean will not be a frontier, it'll be our road. But the road had a guardian, a powerful one. Srivijaya was not a single kingdom, it was a network, a web of islands, ports, naval stations, and vassals. To strike at Srivijaya was to strike at dozens of fortified locations spread across thousands of kilometers. Kings attacked kingdoms. Empires attacked continents. But what Rajendra was planning was neither. He was planning something unthinkable for his age, a synchronized naval assault. Across the entire maritime world of Southeast Asia, not a raid, not a battle, a domino collapse of a maritime empire. To do this, the Chola fleet had to become more than powerful. It had to become omnipresent, arriving at multiple targets across multiple seas at the same time. No Indian ruler had attempted anything remotely close. No Indian navy had the capacity. No Indian plan had ever been so audacious. But India had never seen a ruler like Rajendra, and the Bay of Bengal had never seen the fleet he was about to unleash. In the early months of 1025 CE, the coastline of the Chola Empire changed. It began as whispers and usual activity at ports, long scrolls of inventory, granaries being emptied, and regiments marching toward seaside fortifications instead of inland borders. The fishermen knew before the ministers did. The tides carried a new tension, a hum of preparation, a restlessness that even the sea seemed to understand. Something enormous was coming. And at its center stood Rajendra Chola, a ruler whose ambition no longer fit the land. For years, he had strengthened the empire like a blacksmith heating, folding, and hammering iron. Now he was ready to swing. And the swing would not fall on a neighbor. It would fall on a maritime empire across the sea. Before launching an attack, Rajendra did not study coastal lines. He studied winds. Before selecting targets, he did not count ships, counted currents. Before giving orders, he did not ask if it was possible. He asked how to make the impossible behave. The Bay of Bengal, which others treated as a barrier, was analyzed like a vast open battlefield. Rajendra's scholars charted monsoon cycles. His navigators tracked star paths. His commanders practiced split deployments, drilling fleets to move like limbs of one body. And his shipbuilders faced a challenge no ruler had presented before: build a navy not to defend coasts, but to dismantle an empire across the sea. By mid-1025, a fleet formed on the coast of Nagapattinam that must have looked unreal to the people gathering to watch. Massive warships, some towering like floating fortresses, lined the waters in rows so long that the horizon seemed carved by their masts. Raw wood gleamed under the sun. Iron rims held together reinforced hulls, sails dyed in deep reds and blacks, caught the wind like unfurled wings. These were ships crafted to endure storms, to carry cavalry, archers, infantry, siege teams, a moving army on water. Each flagship bore the tiger insignia of the Cholas. It's painted so large that foreign sailors would later swear that the animals seemed alive when the sails tightened in the wind. Every element of the fleet spoke one message: a land empire has learned the language of the sea. Before the fleet departed, Rajendra performed a simple ritual. He stood barefoot on the sand, seawater rushing over his ankles, as if the ocean itself came forward to listen. Behind him stood thousands of commanders, ship captains, soldiers hardened by land battles, young men who had never left the shore in their lives. He said no prayers. He made no promises. Simply lowered his hand to the water, lifted it back, and let the droplets fall. A gesture seen in Tamil culture for centuries, a gesture of starting a journey with respect. But when Rajendra did it, it felt different. The men watching understood. Their emperor was claiming the sea. When the fleet finally launched, it did not leave like a group of ships. It left like a continent breaking away. Row upon row of vessels cut through the water, their oars beating a rhythm that echoed across the coast. From the shores, the people watched until the fleet became a dark line on the horizon and then became nothing. But the world across the sea would soon see what India saw that morning: a force that moved like destiny. The first target was Kedah, modern-day Kedah, a vital Srivijayan stronghold guarding the entrance to the Malacca Strait. It sat like a gatehouse, deciding who could pass into the eastern trade world. Srivijaya never believed anyone would attack it directly, certainly not from across the ocean. So when the Chola fleet appeared in the waters beyond Kataram, the defenders stared as if witnessing a hallucination. The sea was filled with sails, black, red, gold, moving in disciplined formations. The Cholas arrived not as raiders, not as pirates, not as desperate opportunists. They arrived as a state force, with the discipline of a land army and the unpredictability of the sea. The attack was swift. Chola Marines stormed the port. Archers rained volleys from ship decks. Naval captains maneuvered their vessels like blades cutting control points. Within hours, the fortress that once guarded the entrance to Southeast Asia became the Chola doorway. What made the Chola expedition extraordinary was not just the victory at Kataram, it was what came after. In the span of weeks, not months, the Chola fleet hit Kampucha coast. Panna to Kola Malayar, Ilangasoka, Tambralinga, and deep Srivijayan ports stretching throughout Sumatra. Each strike was not random. Each strike was not aimed at glory. Each strike targeted one purpose: cut the Srivijayan Empire from its arteries. Ports were taken or neutralized, harbors seized, trade routes severed, allies intimidated, vassals detached, naval stations destroyed. It was a chessboard of islands. and Rajendra flipped it piece by piece with surgical precision. The impossible was happening. A land-based Tamilian empire was collapsing, a maritime Southeast Asian empire, through naval force alone. No historian before 1025 CE could have imagined it. No kingdom afterward would replicate it. The most shocking part of the 1025 campaign is this. There was no single climactic battle, no dramatic last stand, no grand naval showdown where the seas boiled with blood. Srivijaya fell because Rajendra refused to fight the way they expected. He did not aim to destroy their fleet. He aimed to destroy their ability to have a fleet. He did not try to capture their ruler. He crippled the network that gave the ruler his power. So without a single decisive moment, Srivijaya broke apart like an island struck by a silent earthquake. Trade collapsed, allies scattered. The Malacca Strait opened free, unguarded, wide as opportunity. The Chola tiger had crossed the ocean, and the ocean had bowed. But when the Chola fleet returned to India, it did not return with plunder. It returned with something far greater: control. Control of sea lanes, control of maritime diplomacy, control of trade, control of oceanic respect. Merchants across the Indian Ocean altered their routes. Arab chroniclers wrote of the unmatched fleet of the Cholas. Chinese diplomats documented the shock in Southeast Asia, and in Tamil country, songs began to circulate. Songs that spoke of Rajendra, not as a king, but as the man who made the ocean part before the step. When the Chola fleet returned in 1025 CE, the Indian Ocean was not the same. Foreign merchants who once sailed cautiously past the Malacca Strait now moved with a confidence they had not felt in generations. Chinese records began to show an unusual pattern: more Tamil names, more Tamil ships, more Tamil emissaries, more Tamil goods. And in ports that once bowed to Srivijaya, a new symbol appeared on trade ledgers, carved into wood, ships, seals, and letters: the tiger of the Cholas. The ocean had a new reference point, a new power whose reach did not fade when the monsoon shifted, a power whose presence was not temporary or accidental, a power that had crossed an entire sea and returned stronger than it left. This was the beginning of something rare in South Asian history, a maritime empire that ruled not by fear but by unmistakable ability. Rajendra Chola did not stop with victory. He began shaping an order. His vision was not domination, it was continuity, stability, flow. If the land empire was anchored in rivers and fields, the naval empire was anchored in trade guilds, diplomatic corridors, protected sea lanes, foreign garrisons and trust, a currency more valuable than gold. Chola ports became safe havens. Chola coinage began circulating in Southeast Asia. Tamil merchant guilds set up enclaves in Sumatra, Malaysia, Thailand, and Cambodia. Slowly, something subtle began to happen. Across the vast stretch from India to Indonesia, the ocean became Tamil in character. It's not in ethnicity, not in conquest, but in influence. Tamil ships brought Tamil scripts. Tamil guilds built Tamil-style shrines. Tamil navigators mapped unfamiliar waters. Tamil communities merged with local cultures. The Cholas did not need to plant flags on every island. Ideas traveled faster than armies. During Rajendra's reign, the Chola navy reached its peak discipline. Admirals trained like mathematicians, calculating speed, wind pressure, routes, and timing with eerie precision. Chola shipbuilders developed a reputation that reached even China. Their vessels were known for deeper hulls, sturdy joints, flexible planking for monsoon waves, and massive cargo capacity. To foreign observers, it felt as though the Cholas were talking to the ocean, and the ocean was listening. Even centuries later, Arab navigators referenced Chola routes, because those routes were carved with a clarity that nature respected. This was their true mastery, not conquering the ocean, but understanding it. In the years following the 1025 expedition, the balance of power in Southeast Asia reshaped itself. Srivijaya did not vanish. No empire disappears in a night, but it never regained its former iron grip over trade. Instead, new powers rose. Khmer Empire under Suryavarman, Tamberlenga. Kedah pagan kingdom in Burma. All of them built relationships with the Cholas, sometimes alliances, sometimes cautious cooperation, always acknowledging the same truth. A new force had joined the theater of the East. Chola emissaries attended coronations. Chola merchants funded temples. Chola guilds mediated regional trade disputes. Chola envoys brought back fine ceramics, jewels, manuscripts, and technologies. The Indian Ocean world was becoming cosmopolitan, connected, and multicultural. In every harbor where this new age blossomed, there was a quiet memory of the year when the Chola fleet arrived like a storm and left behind a new dawn. Chola expanded the land empire to the Ganges. He built the great city of Gangai, Konda Cholapuram, a royal capital celebrating the northern campaign. But even this monumental success could not overshadow the significance of 1025. Because land conquests are common, India has seen hundreds. But a naval expedition across an entire ocean that defeated a maritime empire and reshaped the trade world for decades that stands alone. It has no parallel in Indian history, and Rajendra knew it. In his royal inscriptions, he proudly recorded his land conquests. But he carved the Southeast Asian expedition with a reverence that felt almost personal, as if he knew he had changed something far larger than a kingdom. No empire stays at its peak forever. After Rajendra's reign, the Chola navy remained powerful, but cracks began appearing. Internal disputes, pressure from the Pandya's rising powers in Sri Lanka, shifting trade routes, and the inevitable toll of maintaining a massive oceanic presence. The fleets that once shook the Malacca Strait now stayed closer to home. The world moved on. New powers rose in Southeast Asia. The Chola shadow grew shorter. But legends have a way of surviving long after reality fades. And in port cities across the Indian Ocean, merchants told stories of the Tamil ships that arrived like thunder. Even centuries later, Malay chronicles mention the Cholas with awe. Chinese records describe the expedition with surprise. Indian inscriptions commemorate it with pride. The echo of 1025 never completely disappeared. History remembers empires for different things: Rome for its legions, Mongols for their horses, Ottomans for their artillery, British for their naval networks. But the Cholas? The Cholas are remembered for something rarer, something almost poetic. They took a civilization rooted in rivers and taught it to command the ocean. They proved that a Tamiline empire could think beyond geography, beyond borders, beyond the subcontinent. And when Rajendra's fleet crossed the Bay of Bengal, he did more than defeat Srivijaya. He carved a message into the heart of the Indian Ocean. We were here. We learned your language. We mastered your storms. And for one brilliant moment in history, we ruled your waves. In the end, every empire must accept a truth older than any king or kingdom. The ocean remembers longer than men do. Ships rot, harbors vanish, inscriptions fade. Even the mightiest fleets dissolve into the currents that once carried them, but some moments, some decisions, some journeys refuse to disappear. 1,000 years have passed since Rajendra Chola's Therasad cut through the Bay of Bengal. The waves that once slapped against their hulls now touch different shores under different flags, in a world the Cholas could never have imagined. And yet, in the quiet between the tides, their story still moves, not as a memory of conquest, but as a reminder of what ambition can look like when it refuses to be confined by geography. For centuries, India looked inward, toward rivers, fields, and kingdoms bound by land. The Cholas looked outward, at the horizon, at the unknown, at the sea that most believed could not be ruled. And in doing so, they left behind something far more enduring than territory, a demonstration of possibility. That a civilization from the Indian subcontinent could build ships that crossed entire oceans. It could influence lands thousands of kilometers away. That it could stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's greatest maritime powers, not by chance, but by design, discipline, and courage. Today, the temples remain, inscriptions remain, the art remains. But the ocean remains most of all. And if you stand on the shores of Nagapattinam or Kavrapumpattinam at dawn, when the wind is low and the world is still, you might hear something faint beneath the waves, not the roar of battle, not the shout of sailors, but the whisper of a forgotten certainty. The sea is not a barrier, it is a road. And once we walked it, the Chola ship may never return, but its wake still hasn't vanished.